Chair now recognizes the distinguished ranking member, Mr. Hice, for his 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Redding, on June 29th of 2021, Ranking Member Comer wrote a letter to you seeking information regarding the leak of taxpayer information that led to the story that I mentioned in my opening statement in ProPublica. Basically, the letter from Mr. Comer draws attention to the lack of an adequate audit trail system that would record events occurring on the IRS's system, such as people accessing sensitive files. And although I appreciate your comments that you welcome oversight, the fact is, from our experience, although you did answer some of the question, there were much in the letter from Mr. Comer that you never answered. So let me ask, has the IRS taken steps to improve its audit trail capabilities in order to ensure that it knows who is accessing sensitive taxpayer information?
We have that in process, and we're trying to do all we can. Taxpayer security, taxpayer protection of their data is really one of the highest priorities for the Internal Revenue Service. The comments that were not answered in that letter deal with specific instances, and I believe that we referred Congress to Treasury Inspector General for Tax Administration. They have sole jurisdiction over that particular issue. And so detailed questions I would refer to TIGTA.
Well, let me ask you this. Does the IRS identify, do you have any way to identify returns of and other type of information on individuals who may be at higher risk for leaked information? Do you red flag those? Is there any way of identifying who might be high risk?
There are certain systems for individuals in certain categories, but that would, when you're talking about high income folks and high net worth, whether they would fall into that. But the protections for everyone are significant. And I don't believe that there has been a public statement that it actually was a leak or a breach from the Internal Revenue Service where that data came from. So, I put that on pause and ranking member, like you, I share the concern here. The delay in getting answers for the public certainly impacts the ability of the public to have trust and respect for the Internal Revenue Service.
Yeah, it sure does. And regardless of where it came from, there was a lot of sensitive information that was leaked or that was made available. And we've got to have answers to that, Mr. Commissioner. We've got to have answers to that. Are there steps to limit access from IRS agents to certain individuals or high-risk individuals?
We have tracking, the unauthorized access is one of the highest reasons I believe that most IRS folks might be terminated, other things on their own tax returns, et cetera, et cetera. But we do have a tracking, and actually TIGTA has the ability to see that as well in a fairly timely manner. So if somebody was...
Do you have any idea how frequently IRS employees or contractors attempt to access information in an unauthorized manner?
I don't, but I believe TIGTA would have all of that information.
I sure would like to get that information. Well, then let me just...
We give a question for the record and maybe see what we can find for you.
Okay, I would do that. Let me ask you this. Are Biden administration political appointees, are any of them under investigation in connection with the ProPublica leaks?
I am not, 6103 Internal Revenue Code, I'm not really able to speak to specifics as to any taxpayer. And I think I've testified that before this committee one time. So I can't really answer that.
Well, that answer really doesn't surprise me, I suppose. But to be honest, considering the massive amounts of leaks that took place on sensitive taxpayer information and the seemingly inability from the IRS to track who is accessing that kind of information, and your unwillingness or lack of ability, whatever the case may be, to answer some of these questions, no wonder there's a trust problem. And so I would ask you, in light of all of this, why should the American people continue to trust you with their tax information?
The Internal Revenue Service protects the rights of every taxpayer, and taxpayer privacy, taxpayer information is the highest order for the Internal Revenue Service. And if you look at the history of the organization, and you're referring to a situation, you understand that we receive about 1.8 billion cyber attacks each year. You also understand that we have millions and millions of interactions with taxpayers in an online situation. So I think if you actually looked at the volume of information we have, and I'm not saying that one potential situation is acceptable. No situations are acceptable. Nobody having their information made public is acceptable. But I'm confident, and I interacted with the IRS on the outside for 36 years, being on the inside. I'm confident that if people actually became aware, and we'll come and meet with you and all the rest to walk you through what these programs are. We have done that with other committees as well. But I'm confident if you saw what we have, you would be confident in the abilities of the system. And I appreciate where you're coming from. I appreciate the concern, not only from the folks who might have been referenced in the article or articles, but of every American. And we take this to heart. There's a very serious situation. It is a crime for somebody to breach the system if that's how this occurred and take that information outside. And like everyone else, we would hope that that would be appropriately prosecuted against people if they committed that crime.
Thank you, Commissioner. The gentleman's time has expired, but let me say, Mr. Hice, if you're interested in that briefing the Commissioner just offered, would be glad to help work with your staff to organize that.
I would be interested in that, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we'll proceed. Thank you, Mr. Hice.